But there's a lot of ways that you can actually memorize what to write for an essay without even knowing the topic. Like how to memorize like an outline for an introduction, how to memorize an outline for body paragraphs, that sort of stuff. Do you do that? Do you do any of that in school and stuff?
Yeah, I picked up like writing videos essay at school.
Oh, cool. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. What kind of system are you in for?
Well,
just
kind of like complicated. For me, I did like the IGCSE first language English paper like a few months ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
So it's kind of like local, but semi-local in a way local, but not exactly, because they tell us to do like the IGCSE English and math and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's kind of a mix. Okay. Yeah. So you do a lot of different kinds of writing then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of that can be helpful. I think definitely if you're learning how to write a thesis statement or something like that. But these two tests, they have very specific styles that they're looking for that you don't really practice. I think unless, are you an IB student by chance? Yeah, so the IB helps with the SAT essay a lot for like the analysis and stuff. So it's a little bit helpful there, but they're both super weird. So I'll try to hang out and make sure I can get you a good outline for how to memorize those sorts of things. What about you, my friend? What are you up to?
I'm in HS, so I'm thinking about whether to take SAT.
Oh, cool. Okay. Where are you leaning one way or the other? Or?
No, I don't know right now, so we're just doing practice tests to see which one I'm doing better in.
What's the story?
Because I'm not really good at writing at all, so that's why we're seeing what will I do better in.
You mean like the essay writing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you you stage guys?
HS, yeah.
Yeah. Because you guys don't do a lot of like analysis.
Yeah, we do a lot.
Oh wait, are you in APs?
Not right now, but then I'll continue like.
Okay, yeah, because APs, if you do AP English or AP Lit, it'll definitely help with your writing a lot, but it's definitely not easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, you basically did one of each so far?
I'm taking ACT right now.
Oh, okay, all right. Just once?
The first time.
First time. Wait,
Without
prep. Oh wow.
Yeah, the English one is kind of like the grammar practice.
Yeah. Did you finish on time?
Yeah, I did.
Oh really? The reading too?
Oh, I just did the first part.
You just the English part. Okay. So you haven't tried the ACT reading yet?
Not yet.
Yeah. What did you think about the ACT reading? Did you finish on time?
I initially thought some time was tight, but I'm starting to get used to the time.
Starting to get a little bit, yeah, it's like a race. Yeah, so you'll have a lot of fun with that, actually. Yeah, okay, I guess, yeah, sorry, was it from, yeah, keep going. I'll try to answer lots more of your questions. So, first of all, guys, thank you so much for actually coming out. I think just before summer vacation starts, we like to sort of help everybody out and let you guys go into summer with more of a clear idea of what you want to do, whether it's the ACT, the SAT. Whether you've taken the ACT more than once or you haven't taken either of them at all, I want to take some time to sort of make sure that you guys get an idea of the structure and the time management and some of those different obstacles that you'll see as far as the test format. I'll also give you guys some scores that you'll probably take into your university applications, your admissions process, to give you an idea of where you stand compared to the applicants in 2017. So we'll take a close look there. And then try to get you some specific tips, and then again, of course, go around and hang out. We've got a lot of our SAT teachers here with English. We've got Ingrid and our head of math and science, Jack, who will be here to answer any kind of math or English questions for you guys. So just jump in. And a lot of people sort of, wonder like, how important are the SAT, the ACT for what I'm doing, for getting into college? Do I need it if I'm going into the UK? No, but for the US, there are some schools that don't require it, actually. However, last year we are still seeing millions and millions of people taking the SAT, and 60% of high school seniors jumping into the ACT. But here's the deal. University applications are getting trickier and trickier as we go through. We've got, just in 2017, admission statistics that are absolutely insane, places that are under 10% acceptance rates, yet everybody in Hong Kong is trying to go to these same few places, and one of the ways that you can sort of differentiate yourself when UCLA is receiving 102,000 applications in 1 year is to actually get those ACT scores up, those SAT scores up, your APs, your subject tests, whatever they are. This is one more opportunity for you guys to separate yourselves, distinguish yourselves, whether the school requires it or not. And we're going to take a closer look at some of the average scores for some of these schools later on. So some common questions that a lot of people do ask. Some of the similarities and differences that you will find between the SAT, the ACT. I've taken the ACT a bunch of times. Can I simply just jump into the SAT, or I've been studying for the SAT, can I switch? We'll talk about those. There are a lot of similarities. Does one test actually look better for my application than the other? Short answer, no, but we'll get into that a little bit later. A lot of preparation tips, and then some key deadlines, some key dates in the processes. So we're going to start with some of the formats and some of those scores with the average numbers for a lot of key universities that people are interested in applying out of Hong Kong. Some tips when it comes to the English section, the reading section, essay writing, math, a lot of the key things to know. And of course, we'll still be here. Yeah, we'll still be here to answer a lot of questions and stuff like that after, if you do have specific questions on how to do the essay, how to be a better writer, what sort of things I can work on in my math, how to use a calculator properly and save time. So a lot of those tips we'll get into. And again, those key dates and deadlines that we mentioned earlier. So here are the formats of the two different tests and a lot of the scores to beat. So SAT basically breaks down into three major sections. You've got this is going to be the sort of the English, the grammar, the reading, all that sort of stuff. And then the math. The essay, of course, is a separate score, but it's optional. You don't actually need to take the essay. However, this is something that you might want to consider, especially if you're going for a liberal arts degree, if you're going into pre-law, or if you're going into anything that would benefit from advanced writing skills. The essay is a great way to show that. We're going to get into a little bit more detail for each of these sections. So I'll try to give you some tips just along the way as well. But if you look at the SAT, there's 5 reading passages. I think that's quite a lot actually. It's 52 questions and a lot of different genres. We're going to talk about some tips with these different genres later. But you really need to be able to read a lot of different genres, whether it's literature, we talk about history. These are things that you need to be able to sort of comfortably get into, find those details, and get the correct answers. For the writing and language, a lot of stuff that you do need to get into, and we'll talk about tips for grammar. Memorizable stuff, you need to know your grammar, and then all of those writing conventions, things like organizing a paragraph. Where does the thesis statement go? Should I add something, delete something? All of these different techniques within the writing and language. For the math, we're going to see some big differences with the ACT. The math actually has 2 different sections, a calculator section and a no calculator section, where you actually need to be sort of prepared to jump into both and know how to use your calculator, and then when you shouldn't use your calculator, even in that calculator section. A lot of people might argue that the SAT math is slightly easier than the ACT, even though you can't use a calculator, but that's because memorization and practice actually does help you. And a lot of people can mess up with their calculators from time to time. But here's where, this is something that we were talking about a minute ago, especially if you're coming out of HKS or if you are an IB student. The essay section for the SAT is really analytical. So this means that it's not your opinion whatsoever. In fact, if you include your opinion, you'll actually lose some points there. What you're basically doing is taking a look at a passage from a speaker or a writer, and explaining what they're trying to say, how they're trying to say it, and organize an essay about them, not about you. In the SAT one, nobody cares about your opinion, sadly enough. So yeah, you gotta be careful with that. A lot of people do have trouble. Okay, so yes, some scores for the SAT. These are the recently released numbers for the SAT, and it just goes to show you how important practice actually is. 5% of SAT test takers make it in that sort of golden area. 1,400 is kind of considered the minimum for an Ivy League type school, and a lot of people do demand, I want to get that 1,400, I want to get that 1,500, 1,600. Okay, great, but last year you would have to be in the top 5% of all test takers. You can kind of see the average here is, it's well below what you might expect. There are a lot of people who struggle to do this test, and you really need to, go the extra mile and take the extra effort to get those top scores. Just to give you an idea of what average actually means, if you look over here, for a couple of key schools everybody sort of knows and loves, UCLA, the average is over 1,300. NYU, over 1,400. UPenn, over 1,500 average. Okay? And if you've got friends in school, everybody wants to apply ED to Penn, everybody wants to get into Wharton Business School or this or that. But again, this is your competition, right? So it just goes to show you the importance of actually preparing ahead of time. ACT is much bigger, but it actually has less time. The key difference you'll notice right here is actually the science section. So a lot of people sort of ask, why would I take the ACT? Why would I do the science section? It depends on your goals. A lot of people who are considering going into engineering, going into a STEM program, who want to be able to show their abilities, do consider the ACT and really want to get a top score in that section. Is this as important for every major, every subject? No, not necessarily, but it is part of the ACT, and a lot of people who are going into engineering school, technical schools, do prefer to take the ACT because it has that science. Again, an optional essay. Schools don't require it, but you might sign up for it and show those writing skills again. So you'll see it's really, really similar to the SAT. You've got a reading section, you've got an English section, which is sort of the grammar of the language. But you'll notice with the reading, compared to the SAT, it's 4 passages, which is fewer to read, or less to read, but it's actually almost half the time. So it is really, really fast, and I think you'll see this in the next ACT class when you jump in. It is sort of like a race for the reading section of the ACT. However, the redesigned SAT actually went ahead and just sort of copied exactly what the ACT is doing. It's nearly identical. Yeah, there are a lot more questions, but all the question styles are the same, and you can actually transfer a lot of those skills if you are considering doing those different tests. But again, now we have a science passage, but the math is, you can use your calculator the entire time. But again, and Jack will tell you, having a calculator by your side isn't necessarily putting in that much of an advantage. It can actually be a disadvantage to rely too much on your calculator. So there are a lot of tips and tricks that you want to make sure you get with those equations. The essay here we were talking about 3 perspectives, but again, it's other people's perspectives. It's not necessarily yours. And you need to actually make sure that you develop and organize an essay in a way that meets certain goals with the scoring criteria. I'll talk to you guys more about that too. Okay. So some of those key scores. The average, you can see again, much like the SAT, the average that you would expect is it's a lot lower than any expectations. 21 on average. But the 98th percentile is a 28. So if you're scoring a 28, if you're scoring a 29, you're in the top 10% of ACT test takers, which is pretty good, right? But again, it really depends on what schools you're going for and what averages you need, what sort of makes you above average. So if you look at the same sort of schools, 29 is sort of like the minimum for a lot of these schools. UCLA going all the way up to 34, and nobody really goes higher than 34. Even Harvard, nobody averages 36. That would be statistically improbable to have perfect applicants each and every year, but that's about as high as it gets. So even with that 29, yeah, you start thinking about maybe taking another time. What are some different tricks, some different tips that you can go through to get that score up? So as far as actually determining, I know that this is something that a lot of people consider. Which one should I do? Should I pick this one? Should I pick that one? Well, obviously we did talk about some of the different considerations. Number one is the timing. The ACT is so much faster. It really is a race. You can see the SAT for different sections, 30% more time, 40% more time when it comes to these different sections. So you might have different challenges, but a lot of time to read, a lot more time to do the grammar, the questions. Again, the science. Do you actually need a science? Are you going into a STEM program? Are you majoring in some sort of science subject? Then maybe you do want that, right? It's not particularly challenging, but the SAT just doesn't test it, so you don't necessarily need it. And then the different challenge levels. A lot of people actually are fine with the speed of the ACT. For some people, slowing down can actually be a disadvantage. Sometimes just going through the paces, going a little bit faster, does help them. But if speed is not for you, the SAT is a lot slower, and you can slow down and feel a little bit more comfortable there. But then again, what is, sort of pick your poison? Are you stronger at math? Well, the ACT might be a little easier for you. If you're weaker at math, the SAT might be a little bit easier for you. And one of the best ways to really find out is to just do these diagnostic tests, give it a shot for both sides, and really figure out what the best fit is for you. And again, those essays are a little bit different as well, so it comes down to so many different elements that can help you sort of pick and choose the test. Okay, so for tips, strategies, and a lot of these different things that we can sort of do to separate you guys from the rest of the crowd, it is really individual. Depending on what your strengths and your weaknesses are, a lot of people have memorized every single grammar rule, every single verb tense or mathematical equation. You might be really good at geometry and just know all of your shapes, no matter what, right? So for everybody, it is individual. It is sort of unique. But I'll go over a lot of the key things that many people do have trouble with, and get you those different tips, those different strategies for you. But just as a quick sort of easy way to break this down, reading is kind of, when it comes to those reading sections and those different kinds of genres, those different passages, reading is kind of like learning a musical instrument. If you're trying to learn the piano, you need to expose yourself to jazz, to classical, to all of these different genres, and that's the same for reading. If you only read one kind of text, if you're only reading history, if you're only reading literature, you won't be prepared for these different things. So in a nutshell, you need to read as much as possible, and they can basically be broken down to sort of formal or informal styles, formal and informal text types. A formal style would be something that has an introduction with a thesis statement, a body paragraphs, and a conclusion. The informal style would be more with character development, figurative language use, plots and climaxes and all this sort of stuff, like a TV show or like a movie. So you want to make sure that you get all of those different text types in a variety of different genres. Even stuff that dates back to the 1800s, the 1700s, that you might see in your school English class will pop up in these two tests. One of the easiest ways to actually get points is to go in memorizing what you should memorize. Before you get into this test, before you even sit down, you should have every single mathematical equation possible memorized. All of these different things to sort of avoid using those calculators. You really need to have those in the back of your mind at all time. And then again, all of the grammar, all of the writing conventions. This is typically what we would call, and I hate to say it, these are the things that we would call like the easy points. Okay, the stuff that's memorizable, this is where you need to actually come out on top. A lot of people have trouble with the reading. A lot of people have trouble with the essay writing. You don't know what topics you're going to get in the reading. You don't know what topics you're going to get in the essay writing. But math hasn't changed in a very long time, and it's not going to change anytime soon. Grammar hasn't changed in a very long time, and it's not going to change anytime soon. So you really need to get in and memorize a lot of these rules. As far as the two essays are concerned, you can actually go in and prepare an outline, organize an entire essay, how you're going to write it, what you're going to do first, what you're going to do second, what you're going to do last, key phrases, transition words, this sort of thing, before you even go into the test. And if you don't know how to write an introduction before the test, if you don't know how to write a thesis statement or body paragraph, you're going to be in big trouble, and you're going to run out of time. Okay, so one of the other things that you really need to do is to understand how to outline, understand how to write an essay before even seeing the topic. But I'll just let you guys look at some of the other things that you need to prepare for when jumping into these two tests. So there's a lot. There's a lot when it comes down to it, whether you're doing, whether you're worried about the English section, the reading section, the science section, the math section. There's so much to consider. Character development and figurative language use, understanding what symbols are, understanding irony, sarcasm, different tones, different themes, all of those different probabilities for math, when you need to use a calculator, when not to use a calculator. I mean, this right here, all of the punctuation that you guys need to know, this actually, really hurts native speakers of English who come in and say, oh, I speak English, I've been speaking, I know this, it's so easy. Okay, fine, when was the last time that you actually tested yourself for these grammar rules? And usually it's elementary school. People don't test this stuff in middle school anymore. Middle school, you read. High school, you write. Okay? So a lot of people think they know what sounds right or sounds wrong. But in the end, you need to have all of these things memorized without skipping a beat. A lot of inequalities, but then again, those are the equations that you can actually memorize. But with the SAT, the ACT, you will need to be able to do multiple choice or actually filling in your answers as well. Methods of organizing written passages. For both of these tests, you'll have to take information, add it or delete it or move it, and really understand how passages are organized. So those are things that we do practice a lot with students. Vocabulary is still number one in almost everything. And then again, all of those different shapes that you have for geometry, every single shape that you can imagine. And these are actually applied when it comes to charts, graphs, images, especially when in math, of course, but then when you jump into the ACT science section as well. For IB students or for AP students, stylistic devices are a really, really big one, especially for the SAT essay. You need to understand what these devices are. And again, symbolism, metaphors, oxymorons, all these different things that writers do, and then actually what their effects are on readers before you jump in and write your own essay, your own introduction, your own body, paragraphs and conclusions. So as far as tips for each and every one of these things, they do take time. And again, everybody has their own strengths or weaknesses, but please feel free to stick around as far as specific questions are concerned for these different things, and we'll be able to help you guys out for each and every one as they appear across these different tests. Okay, different deadlines, different dates that you can actually take the test. So here we are, June 30th. We always advise people to take diagnostic tests before the summer actually begins, so that you can have sort of a clear idea going into the summer what you're going to actually do. Whether you want to take an ACT one, an SAT one, or both, you should go into the summer having a clear plan of what works for you, and then actually start your past paper practice. The College Board actually recommends a minimum of 20 hours of just past paper practice to go up only 100 points. Okay, so if 20 hours sounds like a lot to you, it's maybe the minimum. Okay, so as far as organizing your schedule, that should start, July's tomorrow, guys, so that should start, as soon as possible with, how many papers am I going to do each week, and how much time am I going to set aside. 20 hours is really the bare minimum to only go up about 100 points. We were talking about the August SAT date. There is one in the US, but this is also when you want to start planning your registration. Typically, the registration deadlines for every test are 1 month beforehand. So let's say that you wanted to register for the September ACT, it's the beginning of September. You need to be prepared by the beginning of August. You can actually miss the deadlines, but then they do late fees. So it just costs a little bit more money. But here's the big time. Okay, this is when you guys are going to be actually taking these tests. And the awful part about the SAT this year is there's really only 2 dates. It's only October and December for the international dates. So you really only have those 2 chances, which is sort of painful to hear. You can take the subject test if you're doing any additional subjects like math or chemistry, literature, biology, something like this. There are a lot more, but for the SAT, the main test, there's only 2 dates. And you really need to make sure that, hey, listen, okay, I'm going to go in October. What if you're sick? What if you're not really feeling good that day? If there's traffic, you're late. You always want to have at least 2 or more tests under your belt. So always be prepared, and it's good just to register for the December just in case. A lot of people do wonder, oh, is this too late for my university admissions? No, you can submit the scores for your university applications way after all of your actual uni applications. So December is fine. Some of the uni applications aren't even due for the US until February. So you can start even looking at those later dates as well. But for the ACT, there are a lot more options. You get 3 different test options. And this is a little bit weird. I don't know if you guys are aware of this sort of change that they're doing now. So last year, they would only have 1 day. What they're starting to do now is they're starting to offer morning and afternoon ACT test dates so that you don't have to wake up at 5 a.m. And this is potentially a game changer. These 2 companies are competing against each other. It's sort of like Coke and Pepsi for business competition. And the ACT has decided, okay, what if we offer people afternoon test dates? What if we offer people, more than 1 day in the same weekend? So they're going to be rolling this out. This is something very new for international test centers. So be sure that you do check with your test center if there's going to be an afternoon date. And again, you do have so many more options. With the ACT as well, there's going to be a computer-based testing option too. So of course, all of the universities are going to still accept these things, but that is something to consider as well, whether you feel comfortable doing an actual computer-based test, or if you just want the good old-fashioned pencil and paper. But be sure that you do check with your test center. Other than that, guys, something that we do sort of offer, I want to make sure you guys do know today, is that basically what you want to do is always get that diagnostic test. And like we said, everybody has their different strengths and weaknesses. Make sure that you sort of identify yours. Sometimes just going in and buying a book and doing it yourself and just simply tallying the scores, I mean, it can help, but you do really want some feedback on what those certain sections are, what those different question types you're sort of missing out on are, and get some recommendations for as far as how many lessons do you really require, where should you spend your time and your energy, and make sure that you get those scores up, whether that's in private lesson, groups, courses, or intensive camps. But yeah, that's about it, guys. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And if you do have any questions, please just let me know. I'm happy to answer anything. Ingrid is also here. She teaches a lot of our SAT for English and reading and the essay writing. Jack is also here from our math and science department for any math and science related questions whatsoever. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. But anything off the bat, any kind of like immediate question? No, did that help you out with your SAT stuff?
Yeah, for sure. Like I only took it once and I'm planning on taking it again. So obviously, like you said, just doing your practice test and getting familiar with like the structure and how it's done is really something that I'll probably need to.
Yeah. I think one of the things too is, and I mean I could do if I were to give you guys every single sort of breakdown of every single question, it would go on for hours and hours. But a lot of I think one of the things for the reading section especially is knowing those different question types. How are you with the sort of the evidence-based ones? Yeah.
Those are okay. I think the one that really gets me is the history one. Like, those are the ones that are a little bit, like, want to.
Just the topics?
Yes, yeah. And I think it's just being more exposed, like you said, by reading more and just having like a wider range of.
Yeah. Is it the comparative part that gets you with those? Because almost always those passages are the ones where there's like passage A, passage B, and both the ACT and the SAT have these. So I mean that's a but does that really trip you off a little bit?
Yeah, it does. I feel like just the reading section I think is something I probably use in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, just
I think. What's your strategy with those, by the way? Are you reading both of those passages one after another?
Yes.
Yeah. How's that working out for you?
I don't know. I think it just like first, obviously, I like to read everything versus get kind of like see the overall like kind of what's asking, like the questions they're asking for. But it's kind of hard to like see especially when you compare them and then see kind of like what the question's asking. Like I think that's something that.
Just understanding the question.
Yeah, like sometimes it's a bit difficult, and then also because it's like multiple choices too, so maybe the choices sometimes can be quite similar, or like they can be something that's like it's very tricky, like the words that they use, I feel sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that you might think about trying for that in particular is reading just one of the passages. Going through, and what you can do is, so if you for the SAT, it doesn't tell you these questions are passage 1, these questions are passage 2, these questions are both. So what you can do with the SAT comparative one is read the first passage. And you can kind of, when you're done reading, just quickly check how many lines was that, where did it end? Let's say it ended at line 47. And then any question that either says passage 1 or goes up to line 47 is your passage 1 question. And you can kind of take care of those first passage questions and really get a deep understanding of that first one before you move on to the second one. And then you just kind of do the same thing. Okay, what are my lines for that second one? Where does it end? All of those passage 2 questions. And then by the time you get to the questions that are comparative, those two hopefully should be night and day. Right? You should have a really clear difference between the two. But I think the biggest thing for, even if it's the ACT reading that you're going to jump into So they have a comparison where it's passage A, passage B. And a lot of people think, okay, these are completely different. One is positive, one is negative. One is this side of the argument. One is the exact opposite side of the argument. And it's not always true, which I think is really tricky. And then you throw in these historical topics, and they can really mix you up a bit. So try that with the line numbers. Try that with the passages, and see if that helps you out. You guys have anything particular on your mind? Yeah, sure.
Would there be any bad consequences if a student sits for the ACT exam for more than 3 times?
Bad consequences? No. I mean, there's never bad consequences. You can submit the scores you want, okay? But universities will be, I think, aware. Typically, what you want to see is an upward trend. Okay, so I would say if there are any bad consequences, it's when you sit the ACT or the SAT, you get one of those top scores, and then there's a consistent downward trend in your scores. Clearly something has been going on with your practice, you're studying things like this. But no, I mean, take the ACT. If you want to take it a few times, that's fine. Your scores are good for 2 years. Your scores are good for 2 years. So if you guys are thinking about when should I take it again, I don't know if you really do you really need to take it again in September, October, and December? That's 3 more times. Probably be strategic. Instead of putting yourself in a high stress situation 3 times, you might consider a lot more preparation for 1 more time that will be your last one. If you've already taken it several times, slow it down a little bit. Make sure you understand all of those different questions for the sections, and then really go for 1 final push instead of again and again and again. I think a lot of people confuse quantity and quality, where they say, okay, I want to do 100 ACT test papers. Okay, all right, fine. If that's what you want to do, 100, that's good. Have fun. But what are you doing with those 100 papers, right? Are you actually just sort of, going through, circling, checking the answers, throwing it away, next, 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 or are you going through it, circling the answers, and then checking to see what went wrong? What types of questions am I missing? One of the big things that you want to do for ACT or SAT is identify patterns that you're having trouble with. What am I usually missing? Instead of blindly saying, oh, this time I got 10 wrong, and this time I got 11 wrong or 8 wrong. Okay, what are those 10? What are those 8? What is making you, why are you losing your points? So if you're thinking, okay, I want to take the ACT 3 more times, 4 more times, it may or may not be necessary. One of the most important things, again, is, when you go back, is just diagnostic, getting feedback. The ACT and the SAT, they both have very specific question types that are repeated every single test, every single year, until there's a major change or something. So you really want to go through it, not just do a DT just for practice. Okay, I got some practice time, great. You also want to do it to identify those patterns of questions that you're having trouble with. And then that's where you focus your time, that's where you focus your energy. Maybe you hate the history passage, but it may or may not be the thing that's slowing you down, or it may or may not be the thing that's really making you lose those extra points. So I think sometimes the turtle wins the race, right? If you just slow it down and value every test that you practice with, and take a very close look at 1 test, 2 tests, 3 tests, instead of 100.
If it was the last attempt for a student, what would be the latest time that he should?
The latest is December for this year. This would be So December 7th and 8th for the ACT. So that would be if you are going into, if this is your final year. So if this is your final year, this is really your last chance, unless you fly to the US. Okay, so the US actually offers a lot more test dates and stuff like that, and some people do it. Some people do fly out there and get that extra test opportunity. But really, December is going to be your last time, and then it will take typically 3 to 8 weeks to get your score back, and you simply inform all your colleges, all your universities, and they'll wait for that score. However, I think another important consideration is that the universities do rolling admissions, guys. And a lot of it is first come, first serve. So you do want to make sure that that you're ready to submit your application. So if December is your date, if December is your ACT date, your SAT date, start on your university applications. Submit the application, submit the personal statements, submit the questions, all of these things way ahead of time. Okay, and then your application is in the system, the admissions boards are going to be there, and then they're just waiting for your score, and you've got a little bit of a foot in the door, yeah. But yeah, good question. Anything else in the mind? What about you? But I didn't catch your name.
I'm Gary.
Gary, hey Gary, I've seen you before. What about you? Anything kind of like on your mind about these? When you already had one lesson, but what about the English? How did it go?
Grammar kind of shakes, yeah, because like, I'm not really like an English speaker or anything, because I came from a local school, and then I think once you kind of,
Oh, okay.
kind of like grammatical stuff, and then
Yeah.
it's kind of hard for me.
The grammatical stuff is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reading as well.
Yeah.
I'm a slow reader.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. I think for you, focus on like there's 75 questions
Yeah.
for the English. 75 questions. But sometimes up to 25 of those questions are just punctuation.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you can memorize all those different rules, and there's not too many pieces of punctuation, that's 1/3 of the whole test, my man. So if you can do that, it'll put you in a really good position. And then you just figure out the weirder questions. There are some weird ones where you're moving stuff around or you're deleting things. But I've seen more than 20 questions on just punctuation, and that's a really great way to sort of start off and get your foundation for those things. Yeah, but if I wonder with the reading, it might be a little bit challenging for the speed. Are you going into your final year?
No, I'm junior year.
Okay, yeah, so you got some time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just keep reading. There's 4 different styles of reading for the ACT. There's the literature, so you need to study like fiction, reading fiction. There's a social science, so this is like anything to do with humans, studying humans. There's a humanities, which is kind of like non-fiction. And then there's the natural science, which is kind of like biology passages, chemistry passages, these sorts of things too. So if you can get ready by reading stuff like that at school, you'll be in a good position. Yeah. But anything else in your mind? Okay, guys. Did I catch everybody? Do you have anything on your mind? You're good? Okay. You guys all good? Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I hope that answered everybody's question. But yeah, feel free to stick around. Plenty of food, and again. Ingrid's here, I'm here, Jack's here for any math questions whatsoever. So thanks again, guys. Yeah, okay.